Hello, everyone. I'm Arben Skivjani, Deputy Chief Economist and Director of Forecasting here at RealPage, and one of the hosts of Multifamily Talks, a RealPage podcast. Today's guest is Rich Hughes, the head of data science at RealPage. We had a great conversation about how AI has shaped our industry, as well as what future technology advancements he foresees that could further enhance multifamily operations and resident experiences. We also talked about what it takes to build successful teams that can make a mark in the industry and what advice he would give the aspiring data scientists. We hope you enjoy the next 45 minutes or so of our conversation. Well, Rich, right after Andrew sort of invited me to be part of this podcast team, I immediately knew who my first guest was going to be. You are the one who hired me at RealPage, and I'm absolutely sure that you regretted that decision the moment I started that job. Your British accent is so cool. And to be honest, you are one of the smartest guys I know. And I'm not saying that just to embarrass you on the screen, but I truly mean that. And, you know, my only concern was that you support an amateur team, a soccer team, Liverpool. But hey, no one is perfect, right?
Right, yeah.
But seriously, thank you so much for agreeing to be my first guest. And this is my first time hosting a podcast, so still learning the ins and outs of this game.
Okay, well, we're on camera, so I always thought podcasts were just this sort of audio thing, but apparently it's evolving. I'm sorry, viewers, for having to look at me. You may want to switch to audio now. Of course, I didn't regret hiring you until this moment. And now I'm having big regrets. But no, it's been great. It's been a joy to work with you thus far.
Same here. And again, thank you for agreeing. But so today's discussion will be centered around artificial intelligence and also how to build successful teams that can make a mark in the industry. Nowadays AI is everywhere and obviously is present in our industry as well. So I figured who else better than you, the head of the data science team over at RealPage, to sort of tell us how AI is shaping our industry. But before we get there, I thought maybe we could start with some personal questions. So, I'm assuming that you were not born with a job offer or a contract from RealPage attached to your hand, right? So how did a fellow from England, a graduate from a school that I don't think anybody has heard of before, Cornell University, end up working, first of all, in the multifamily industry, and then, of course, for RealPage? How did it all start?
So I thought I wanted to go and work in hospitality, which is why I was at Cornell, because I have a really good hospitality and business programs there as well. And through that, I realized that I was probably not ideally suited to work with lots of people and be nice, but maybe more inclined towards sort of numbers, statistics, those sort of things. So I did a lot of courses in and around pricing and optimization. Revenue management, of course, was sort of already a thing at that point, but other industries like multifamily and rental housing were looking at it. So it was starting to spread its wings. So that's something that I really got into, and I was fortunate to be hired for a company, Archstone Smith, who were a REIT at the time, by Donald Davidoff, who's a luminary of our space and very well regarded, certainly one of the fathers of revenue management in multifamily. I worked with him for a time. Then I joined another REIT in Chicago called Amley, who are wonderful operators, make some fantastic product and super nice people. So I worked with them and did their pricing. And then I realized that to get all of the data I wanted to do all of the things I wanted to do, I really had to work with a company that had data at scale, and RealPage was then the obvious choice because, just the incredibly progressive standpoint they had on data.
Fantastic. Sounds very interesting. Well, at our last Real World conference back in August, our keynote speaker, Mr. Jason Dorsey, asked a question to the audience, which I thought it was very interesting. He asked the audience if they knew when they were kids that one day they would be working in the multifamily industry. And guess what? None of them said yes. Yet they were very excited to be working in this phenomenal industry. So did you, as a young fellow know that one day you would end up working in the multifamily industry?
No, no idea at all. As I suspect you had no idea that you would be either, right?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, I've been in economics for long enough, but never thought I'd end up working in multifamily industry. And guess what? I'm loving it. I wish I had joined it earlier, learning a lot, very dynamic industry, contrary to popular belief. There's a lot to do and a lot to learn from this industry and from the people that are involved in this industry.
Well, so let's talk about the virtues of it, I think, because, hopefully people listening to the podcast will know, but it doesn't hurt for us to say why it's a really good industry. So the first thing is it's massive, right? I think you're the economist. I believe it's the single biggest vertical in the US economy, housing. So, it's great. It's probably not going away anytime soon. A fundamental foundational human need is to have somewhere good to live and that you can enjoy living. Maybe, that helps, enhances your lifestyle, which is certainly something that we do and partner with our clients to do. Another thing I think that's great about multifamily is it's completely egalitarian. There's no inside track or, a closed membership of people that pick who the leaders are. If you look at the leadership of multifamily companies, it's diverse, it's excellent, it's hardworking. It looks like a cross section of society writ large. So, if you have the desire and the capability, you can go a long way in multifamily, and a lot of people have. So, that I think is great, and not all businesses are like that. The other thing is, because of the nature of the product, it's probably lower risk than some other businesses. It's going to be hard to automate housing away. I know AI is going to touch maybe how we do certain aspects of housing or look at certain facets of housing, but the fundamental human need to have a secure place to stay and maybe have a family is not changing at all. There's no technology that could change that. There is a cat now joining the webcast. Apologies for that, Arben. This is Coco, who's a big multifamily fan as well.
There you go.
Off you go, young man. And so I think those factors, the fact that, anyone can do well if they apply themselves, and it's just economically an amazingly good industry, a safe industry. And we provide a valuable service, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that sort of safety, security. I think that's what we provide. I guess the final thing is that the people that own commercial real estate tend to be pension funds, people like that. So, sometimes, on the other side of the positive spectrum, I think, if we help, pension funds grow and old people have a comfortable retirement, that's a good thing as well. So there's a lot of positives in our industry.
I couldn't agree more with you. It's a fantastic industry to be. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with your team for about 4 years now. And of course, I've learned a lot. So for the most part, I know what your team does. But why don't you sort of take a moment to share with our audience about your role and what your team really does? Because honestly, you guys are involved in some really, really cool stuff.
Sure. And I'm fortunate to have the team, first and foremost. They're just outstanding, hardworking, incredibly bright people. But I think we as a team are fortunate to have RealPage as a backbone because of the data and engineering capabilities they bring, their broad array of products that we can use to harness the data from and maybe help power in the next iterations of product. And the strong partnerships it has with the industry and our client base, they're all key components of the success of RealPage and of my team. But our mandate basically is to look at the data that we acquire on behalf of our clients and use it to create value. So that might be insights, it might be forecasts, it might be new ways of doing business. It might be the ability to streamline some things or reduce cost base, or it might be new products that haven't existed before that allow us to create more money from the asset.
Absolutely. But so, no doubt that we all love what we do. I mean, I love, learning more about the economy. You learn doing what you do. So,
let's just plug your other webcast, man of 20 broadcasts. Yeah, I've been enjoying that. But tell everybody on this what the other one is. Go on.
So it's Economy Express. So we sort of share with our audience what happened the past 2 weeks, right? What are some of the things that happened that are affecting the multifamily industry? And of course, number one thing is, jobs, employment, and also the Fed rates. So for now, we were lucky enough not to have the Fed increase the rates, but again, they are very high, and there's a very good chance that in November we might get another rate hike. And where that could take us to. Especially with funds drying up, it can get even worse. So we'll see how it goes. But so my question is, what are some of the things that keep you, wanting to wake up in the morning and continue doing what you want to do? Like for me, as I said, is those unknowns. Like, what are some of the things that are pushing our economy forward or pulling it back? And what about you, Rich? What are some of the things that make you continue to be part of this industry?
It's funny. A lot of what we do is inspired by what our clients are doing and the direction that they want to take their businesses in. So, whether it's sort of rationalizing operations or giving customers the ability to self-serve or looking at new ways that people interact with their product or new services that people might like to purchase, by partnering with our really strong client base and hearing those things, it allows us to be focused on what's important for the industry. And also just in the broader technology space, AI is having a bit of a renaissance right now. Chat GPT, I think, is in the news all the time, doing all the things. The technical name for those sort of things are large language models. And it's a thing that's real. Every now and then, a new thing comes along like, blockchain or the cloud, and it may or may not affect your industry by an amount. And there's some hype. Let me tell you, large language models are real. They're already creating incredible value. And I think as well, we're only using them in a tiny number of ways that will ultimately use them. Right now, obviously, a heavy sort of how can we market better, procedurally generate copy better, engage with customers better, maybe in terms of bots. But you could just as easily use it to create new products. You could have a large language model look at, every review ever written and say, okay, based on these reviews, describe to me the perfect apartment. That would be really cool as well. So I think the fact that the technology frontier is moving, as well as our clients' needs are perpetually evolving, and the renters are becoming, more, their basket of needs changes over time, right? So we have to be responsive to changes in demographics in the marketplace. Those three things keep me on my toes and make it a really fun space to be in.
Absolutely. Now, if you could go back in time, and let me remind you, it's September 2023. With AI, everything is possible. If you could go back in time, what profession would you choose other than what you do now? And please don't tell me that you would be probably playing as a midfielder for Liverpool, but that I wouldn't accept that as an answer.
Yeah, my genes and general lack of coordination would never really make that viable. It's a tough question. I mean, strangely, there's a fair degree of creativity in data science in terms of, looking at the possibilities that the data affords you. Maybe something like an architect would be fun, or I love music, but again, the talent ceiling that I have would definitely preclude me being a musician. But
what type of music?
Play guitar to the best I can. I think that's how we'll describe it. But yeah, I think something that's creative. But I do enjoy the analytics side of work as well. So that's why I said architect, right? Presumably, you're sort of balancing an aesthetic need of a building with the practicalities of it and the physics of what you can do with the materials available.
And then you're in the perfect city to practice that trade in Chicago.
That's right. Birthplace of the skyscraper, ladies and gentlemen.
So no doubt that data science is probably the most respected team, not only here at RealPage, but also in the industry.
Well, yeah, I mean,
not blowing your horn, but
there's a lot of great teams at RealPage,
absolutely.
so I'm not going to say that. We try to be up there. I think that's how we'd phrase it.
And so your team is very goal oriented and very efficient. So remember when I was fully part of your team, I was given a task, a deadline, and everybody on that team was ready to help. And so chances of me failing that task were very slim, unless I wanted to fail. And that mentality, in my opinion, has to do a lot with the leader, in this case, you. So how do you go about building successful teams? So when you decide to hire someone, besides having, nice hair and clean shoes, what are some of the other things that you are looking in a potential candidate?
So obviously there's a sort of a technical capability set that you need to have in order, to use modern tools and methods in the data science arena. And I'll be perfectly honest, everybody on the team is far more technically accomplished than I am. I couldn't do what they do, and I respect them for it. But yeah, they're all just incredibly nice people. And then I've been fortunate to get people with very, very high capability sets and a corresponding small ego to go with it. So, they're absolutely, self-managing adults, self-starting, inquisitive, self-directing, and incredibly smart. So, there's very little management need other than to make sure that the jobs that they're given are the right jobs for their skill sets, and that the projects are progressing in a way that we want them to. So, I've probably been very, very fortunate that, life's just handed me this great group of people. I wouldn't say that, I have any hiring skills. I've got guys from acquisitions that were just amazing people, and very thankful they joined the team. So, all credit to the team. I don't think I've done anything particularly well. Maybe get out their way, right? You give them the freedom to soar. I think that's probably the best thing you can do sometimes. Obviously, we have to solve the problems we have to solve, but I'm not going to micromanage the how or which tool or method. They're bright people. They can work that out way better than I can.
But that's a trait of a good leader, right? You don't want to micromanage. Here's what you need to do. You're going to be responsible for it. Own it. And that's one of the things that I learned early in the days when I joined RealPage. And that was just fantastic. Let's go a bit back and talk a bit more about AI. And we said that it is affecting sort of every aspect of our economy and of our lives too. So you have been in this industry for much, much longer than I have. So can you tell us how the industry has evolved over the years, and has technology made it easier or harder, that process of evolution?
Well, I think technology makes evolution easier because it makes it faster, right? I think the one thing we're all feeling in life is the time between changes is getting shorter and shorter. I always think, if we lived 1,000 years ago or, 2,000 years ago, your life would be the same as your father's life, and your children's life would be the same as your life. Well, that is not true anymore. I have listened to music on devices that are already redundant, right? That they're not in use anymore. The things like CD player, right? When I was small, it came along and it was new, and now nobody uses it for anything. So we're going to see that in, social media platforms spring up and die now in 2 or 3 years. They can go from being massive to irrelevant in 5 years. So just the changing pace of technology, and the fact I think that social changes can adapt to that, right? That, we're not married to a platform or a technology in perpetuity, and that we're very, very willing to pivot to the next thing. So I think that drives some of the change. And then just the fact that more and more data across all domains of life is now digital, right? There's the cost of recording and sampling data is tiny, and so any device can create telemetry now. Smart buildings, thermostats, Nest, or the fact that everything's transacted now on the internet, right? So, how we acquire great residents to come and live in apartment communities, that's a very digital endeavor with multiple touch points, multiple stakeholders, and actually a fairly large payload of information that we can now track about people, how they shopped, who they are, what they're looking for, what a good fit might be, those sort of things. So those things aren't going to slow down. The sort of growth of data just exponentiates over time. So as that happens, we're going to have better and better models that find signals that are indicative of outcomes that we want, so that we can maybe guide people into the best fit for them, or let our customers, the people that own real estate, help find better customers more quickly, or retain customers, residents in the long term. I think they're exciting challenges.
Absolutely, and I think you'd agree with me that change is the only constant in life, right? We've seen changes in technology, changes pretty much everywhere. So how do you see?
My earlier point, it is a constant, but it's an exponent. Absolutely. If it was constant, it would the rate would be constant, right? It's this sort of hockey stick curve that we're on, and it's not slowing down anytime soon.
It's getting absolutely. So how do you see the role of data science evolving in the multifamily industry in the coming years?
So I think there's been a lot of work to make the tools less technical, right? So now I think that if the barrier to doing data science work is almost lower, because I think, for a motivated person, they could go out and get some free tools that now don't require a large amount of coding expertise, and maybe use those to help them sort of do a data science project. So I think we're going to see, through the democratization of data and some of these methods, more people are going to be involved in data science. I think you'll still have specialists that do very, very difficult things, but they will interact with more of the company, and the company people that are interacting with them won't just be consumers of what they do, but will help guide the work or even participate in the projects.
So a number of studies out there prove that those industries, or even companies that invest more in technology, in the long run perform better. So having said that, in your opinion, do you believe that our industry, again, not our company, but our industry in general, invests enough in technology? And also, what are some of the sort of primary concerns that property operators as well as investors should keep in mind when sort of deciding to invest in AI technology for their multifamily properties?
Okay, so two parts. I'll try and remember them both, but let's start with the first one.
I can read them again.
No, it's okay. So the first one, do we invest enough in technology? I think, real estate, one of the draws of it is it's a great risk-adjusted return, right? That's sort of the premise of real estate. It's a nice, solid, dependable, low-risk return, which is obviously, for a certain class of investors, that's really, really important. And how do you get there is by having a low risk profile. So in real estate, we're not the cutting edge of technology, and we shouldn't be. We don't need to be, right? We're not fast moving as like manufactured goods or data products or financial products. So what we can do is we can look to these other industries and see what's successful there and what's not, and then use battle-tested, hardened technologies that we think would be a good fit for us. We shouldn't be pioneering anything. We should be looking to other industries and saying, okay, I see, they have a similar customer acquisition problem that we have. They seem to have solved it with this technology or this method. Therefore, we'll port that across, and we'll take a mature version of that solution and deploy it, rather than be, caught in the R&D cycles that you have to get through to get to that level of maturity. So I think we're late adopters, but I think that's by design, and I think that's okay. And I think that means when we engage in technology initiatives, we're going to get a better return, because there's less risk associated with it for us. So we may give up a little bit in terms of early adoption, but I think the ROI on technology products in real estate probably higher than other industries. So that's the first question. And then the second part was?
So some of the primary considerations that property owners and investors should keep in mind when they decide to invest in AI.
Okay, so AI, like people, it learns from a body of work, and then it gets to apply its learning to new problems or new situation it sees. So, me or you, we might say we wanted to learn about something that we didn't know. We might go and read a book, and then we know the book amount of information and have that. If we're especially lucky, we might get to go to a library that has a section of books, and we can read all of the books, and then we know more because we've got more sources. We can maybe understand special circumstances where one source may be right versus another. AI works in the same way. So the more data you can give it, the more informed it can be, and the better outcomes and decisions it can give you. And at RealPage, we're super lucky because we have length, depth, and breadth of data. And let me describe what I mean by those things. Our founder, Steve Wynn, was a visionary in terms of data. He moved us to the cloud way before anybody else. So all other companies were doing things on DOS and all the information was local. And we put it in the cloud and started keeping it. So we've got literally decades of transactional property information. Against that, we've got millions of units. So, we've got a great footprint. So we've got millions of units going back a couple of decades. And in that couple of decades, we've got up cycles and down cycles. So already we have a data advantage in terms of we've seen how real estate can respond to different economic stimuli, linking it back to your excellent podcast series once again. And then the third thing is we have a lot of products. We're an integrated provider, so we can see maybe how one facet of property operations affects outcomes in another. So those three things together allow us to build ML models, AI models that are very sophisticated, are very hard to surprise because they've seen just about anything, but at the same time can be localized to a specific asset type or location, or to an owner's needs in a way that is meaningful to them.
Now, here's $1 million question for you. Are you worried that right after we're done with recording the session, AI will steal your job? And I understand if you don't want to answer this question, but what's your take?
So behind that, there's the technology taking jobs that's not a new thing for humanity, right? I mean, I'm English. For us, the Industrial Revolution was a big historical point where a lot of manual labor was automated away by machines and factories and those sorts of things. So I think what happened was, first of all, more jobs were created than were removed. Society was more productive, and I think everyone's standard of living increased because of that. And if you'd wanted to stop it, and people wanted to at the time, right? Saboteurs, that's where it comes from, wanted to try and stop the Industrial Revolution, but you can't. Genies don't go back in bottles like that. So what I want or how scared I am or not is irrelevant to what's going to happen in the future. So I think that's the first point I'll make. The second is, it's a tool, okay? Providing I'm good with a tool, or I make sure my skill set allows me to learn new tools as they become available, I shouldn't be threatened by it. In fact, it may make me more potent or more powerful. There's this saying going around right now, AI is not going to take your job. Someone better at AI than you is going to take your job. Maybe that's the threat. Maybe not, right? There's certainly a lot of facets of life that AI is going to struggle with for a long, long time. AI is good with sort of standardized, heavy data dependent problem spaces. AI can never be a plumber, right? Because every plumbing problem is different and you can't standardize it. So there are whole domains of human existence that I think are pretty safe from AI. So I'm pretty excited by AI just in terms of the value it can create and how by using it, maybe we can find new value frontiers. AI is going to create industries and jobs that didn't exist before. So that's exciting for, maybe young people who want to work out what they want to do, even within this great industry of multifamily, as we've said before. Now, there are jobs that we can look at and say, this job is so rigid and inflexible, it's amenable to automation. So AI is at least going to change it and may even displace it. So if I, as a young person looking at jobs, I'd certainly look at jobs in terms of that framework. Is AI likely to change this job in a way that I wouldn't enjoy? But AI may be ultimately liberating. It may take away a lot of the boring, repetitive, rote, mechanical parts of our jobs that we don't like, or at least minimize them and allow us to focus on the more creative value add side of work.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And if you were to ask me that question, I'd probably say that, I'm more worried about, am I doing enough to sort of befriend AI to take me to the point where I can become better at what I do, so I can contribute more to the organization? Because as you said, we can't do anything about it. We cannot stop AI. So you either join the wagon or you fall behind.
Yeah,
absolutely. So now, going back to team building. So before the pandemic, some of us work, from home 2 days a week. Some of us 3 days a week. But pandemic changed everything, and now most of us work 5 days a week from the office. And I don't mean just us at RealPage, but in the industry. So how has that affected your team, or has it affected in any way? Like, is it important for data scientists when they work in a project to meet in person? Because we know a lot of tech companies now have been asking their employees to come back to office.
So even before the pandemic, our team was pretty remote. We're a multinational company. We've got amazing colleagues, not only across the US in all different states, but we've colleagues in Hyderabad, and Manila. So we can't all get together all the time anyway. Now, do we meet as often as we like to? No, we don't. But I think there's a couple of things. I think the collaborative tools that are now available are more sophisticated. People have got better at virtual meetings and virtual workspaces and collaborative online tools. So we're certainly productive in that regard. I think it's changed how we work a little bit. I think folks miss the informal network of, be able to grab a lunch with a colleague, or, share some gossip, or just talk about non-work things. That's always fun. My colleagues are wonderful, productive colleagues, but they're also great people. And, it'd be nice to catch up with them over lunch and see how they're doing and what the vacation plans are, or, talk about shared interests. I think all of us have missed that to some degree, but, at the same time, we have to be judicious with resources. And, if there's a good, compelling business reason for us to get together, we'll absolutely do that. But I don't think we'll do that just to sort of maintain the social fabric, if you were.
So do you think we'll ever go back to working 5 days in the office? Again, not as RealPage, but, throughout the economy? Because I personally don't think that will be possible. I mean, no. you have people who, all they know is work from home.
So I'm going to throw out a bizarre concept called supply chain inversion, right? Which is technology allows supply chains to basically flip. So, it used to be you go to the shops, right? Well, now the shops come to you. It's called Amazon. Or you go to the restaurant. Now the restaurant comes to you. Absolutely. Well, it used to be you go to work. Well, now I think work comes to you.
Absolutely.
So, and that obviously from a real estate standpoint is scary, because what does that mean to the value proposition of the central business district, or living close to work, or, urban centers versus not, or tech hubs, right? There are a million questions that fall out of that. Yeah. I think there will be some reversion to just the more standard model, but to your point, I don't think we're going back to where we were pre-pandemic.
Again, I agree with that. So most of us get excited about, new opportunities that the implementation of new technology can bring. But I think we don't talk enough about like how sometimes implementing that technology, how hard it is to implement that technology. So I just wanted to ask you, like, what are some key challenges faced in implementing AI technology in the multifamily sector, and how can we overcome that?
So for AI, it's not going to be perfect, okay? Because just because it's seen things happening historically in a certain way isn't a guarantee that they'll happen that way in the future, or for one particular use case or example. Statistically, it's probably the best bet you could make, but still, it's not guaranteed. And we see that in revenue management, digital marketing. There's a bunch of places where it cashes out like that. So I think having the expectation of understanding what good looks like. Okay, good is better than you're doing currently, and any improvement is a step forward, right? And don't let not being perfect stop you from moving forward, because I think perfection is a direction, it's not a destination. We can strive for it. I don't think we ever get there. So I think understanding what good looks like and being able to qualitatively evaluate what a good deployment versus a bad deployment does, and setting out with objectives in mind or a hypothesis to prove. If I'm right, AI will do this, that will halve the time this happens, or make this thing complete twice as often, or allow residents to do something they couldn't do before, or enable a sales of a thing that we couldn't sell before. So I think you have to frame the projects in what success looks like, and then measure them against that.
And with that said, my next question is, our industry and especially your team is all about future, right? We want to take our clients to new heights, and in turn, our clients want their tenants to have good and happy lives in the communities that they serve. So, what future advancements do you foresee in AI technology that could sort of further enhance multifamily operations and resident experience? Because you can develop as many technologies as you want. If they are not making the lives of those who use that technology better, then where's the point of developing it to begin with?
I think there are a few things. I don't think we're unique in thinking these terms. So the building the community is a physical asset, but a lot of life now is virtual, right? You have your digital life. So the question is, can we create a digital community that fortifies the physical community? Can we create a digital ecosystem where residents and the management participate in a community in a way that adds value to the extent that it adds value to the physical asset, right? I think that's something people are looking at in a myriad of ways. How might that cash out? Well, it might be sort of a rewards or point system whereby, like airline rewards or hotel reports. It might be the ability to do things we couldn't do in apartment communities, and really sort of lifestyle extension or expansion opportunities. It might be the ability to curate offers and give them to residents. The one thing I think people are realizing now is apartment living is in many ways superior to homeowning, right? Not only the lack of having to pay for capital repairs or being stuck with a mortgage and, not having the flexibility to move when you want, but I think there are, lifestyle things that can come with an apartment living that just you can't get with a house. Spectacular shared amenities or the ability to have experiences that you just couldn't have in a house. I think they're exciting frontiers for us to run down and have AI enablement so people can enjoy them.
Yeah, and in my opinion, the American dream has changed. It used to be, owning a home is the dream. Now that's not the true. It's not the case anymore. Now all I want is a good job, and I want to rent because I can move. Now I can work from home, so I don't need to be stuck in one home. I can work from an apartment.
Well, and have you seen some of the apartments these days? I mean, it literally is like living in a luxury hotel resort. That may appeal to some people more than others, but that's just one type of apartment. There's literally a spectacular living experience for anyone at any stage of their life that's provided by apartments. So, I'm sure people on the call are more aware of this than I am, but the podcast, whatever we call these things that we're doing.
Conversation.
But I think, and the credit to the operators, I think the offerings move forward leaps and bounds. And I just look at some of the assets now and I'm like, oh, I would just love to live here. It looks amazing.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why we currently have 1 million apartments under construction, because we love them, I guess. All right. So now, without spilling the beans, okay, can you share with us anything about any cool product that you and your team are working on? And by asking that question, I don't mean to get you or myself fired. So let me be clear on that.
So, to give credit to the people that did the work, we've been looking at this thing called demand operations, which is basically formalizing the resident acquisition all the way from provisioning digital marketing, loading them up in the funnel, curating them, CRM, pricing. So we have a product that launched at Real World called Demand X, and we get a lot of great feedback from that, a lot of interest. So hat tip to Amy Dreyfus and Liren Howard, who really spearhead that one. So that's something that's exciting and growing and expanding. And then harking back to our previous conversation, we're doing a lot of work right now with large language models. So, the fact that these LLMs can pass the bar exam or get admitted to amazing schools means that the age of conversational AI really is here, right? Then what you have to do, though, is make sure that it can't tell any untruths. That's currently the big problem with conversational AI. You may have read articles about lawyers using it, and it's created case law that didn't exist. So they get thrown out of court because, obviously our first duty in any AI or data initiative is to do no harm, right? And tell the truth. So we're heavily investing in LLM technology, but we're also incredibly invested in making sure that it is incredibly accurate to the extent that our clients would feel happy using it.
Well, maybe you can tell me more about them after this call.
Okay.
Well, I think the period of what we call Great Resignation, which means employees frequently change their job or hop from one job to another, I think is over, right? The latest data suggests that employees are changing jobs less frequently than before. So has it been hard, not just for your team, but for the entire data science industry to retain talent as well as acquire new talent in this sort of environment?
So data science at talent, I think, is at a premium for a few years, just because there are so many industries that can use it. It's obviously we fight with tech giants for top tier talent, right? So that's difficult. So I think the demand's always been there in my space. I think in other job functions, maybe I think there's been more churn by role. I think in multifamily operations, we've been lucky by and large because I think it's quite a stable. Again, I think one of the pros of our industry is it's quite a stable career, right? That you're probably less blown by the winds of economic change or societal upheaval. So we're lucky in that regard. So while I absolutely acknowledge that, and we see it in leasing data, for example, that there's been a lot more chopping and changing of careers and moving around. Actually, through COVID, there was no mobility. Then there was massive mobility after COVID, which is sort of an interesting phenomenon. So it was real, but fortunately, it didn't impact my team too much or the software space that much for us.
You've been in this industry for quite a while in data science industry, and so what advice would you give to those who are thinking about becoming data scientists, be that in our industry or any other industry? All of us could use some good advice from time to time.
So there's a couple of things. Obviously, get the skills and learn the software, but there's incredible amounts of public data out there just ripe for a smart mind to go and look at and find something that hasn't been done before. So I would encourage them to be sort of citizen scientists and do something. Go and find a data set and find a way to create value from it, all the way through from data discovery to creating a model to working out how an end user is going to use your insights to create value or how the economics of your data product are going to work. The one thing we can't be as data scientists is too precious as to where our job starts and stops. You might have to get really good at SQL to get the data that you want in order to create your models. You might have to be a bit more full stack or even do UI work in order to present your findings in a way that people can understand. So, it's becoming a more fragmented space. We've got data engineers now, machine learning operations, as well as data scientists. Already sorts of specializations are appearing. And there's nothing wrong with that. These people get really good at what they do and are able to do it at scale. But for people starting out, I'd say, try and pick a project and do all of it from the back to the front. And that way you'll have an appreciation of all the steps when you work with other people that maybe do part of the chain for you.
Is that the advice you would give to your young self?
My young self, I'm not sure what advice I'd give my young self. I'm not sure it'd be a podcast rated advice, to be honest.
All right. So as we wrap up, what's one key takeaway that you would like our listeners to remember about the intersection of data science and the multifamily industry?
So in multifamily, just from a data perspective, I think that the population pyramid's one thing I keep returning to. So the fact that you've got this big wave of boomers moving through the population that have this sort of accrued wealth, they're incredibly wealthy versus the rest of the population. And I think that they're hoarding wealth that may ultimately end up becoming new homes, when they, inheritances happen and things like that. So there's that. I think there's going to be a demand for a lot of senior product as they move through the, move through the population pyramid. So there's that, and just the troughs that happen as well. If renting is a part of your life, then we're going to be beholden to these sorts of ebbs and flows of the population curve. But if that's changed and now, renting is a lifestyle that you can persist throughout your life, and I think we both think that's true, then maybe that's less of an issue. So that's one thing that I find fascinating, where people are in their lives versus the product offerings that resonate with them.
Well, thank you. And in the end, I have to ask this question. Dua Lipa or Rita Ora?
So I only know Dua Lipa. Who's the other one?
Rita Ora?
No, I have no clue. I'm an old man. I don't know these things.
Another British Albanian. Very famous. Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, Don't Start Now. Cracking single. There you go. Key of B minor. Completely diatonic.
Well, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
and
fun.
I hope our audience does the same.
Just think, it can only get better from here in your series.
Thank you.
All right, it was good catching up. And thanks for people that listened this far.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Multifamily Talks, a RealPage podcast. As always, the views expressed are those of the individuals participating and not those of RealPage.